B, request for approval for an August 2018 ballot request for a 0.5 mil for 10-year levy for the Bedford Fire Department. Chief Massengill, Mr. Francis, if you want to take this one, come on up if we have any questions for you.
At our last meeting, we talked about this as it was recommended by the advisory board members that this board adopt a resolution to place on the August 2018 primary ballot an issue. And the issue is 0.5 mils for 10 years for the purchase of fire equipment, apparatus, vehicles and other equipment and maintenance on those vehicles. There are two different alternatives. One alternative speaks what I just said it covered. The other one covers those plus building needs. We've talked about that. We can see some needs coming down the road. 2 of our 3 fire stations are over 70 years old and crumbling in front of our eyes, as all 70-year-plus buildings are. Adding the word "and building needs" would give us a little flexibility should something drastic happen. We have no intention of buying or building a new fire station out of that. It's just to cover large needs that might come up. There's been some discussion among board members, as you are aware, that maybe we ought to leave that off and restrict it only for equipment. I personally have no problem in doing that. I'd prefer the one with building in because it gives us a little more flexibility, but if it's the pleasure of the board to not include building, I have no problem. I think it's more important for us to get the millage passed that'll cover the large equipment and apparatus needs than it is to have a couple of words added that might help if we had a building need. If we run into a major problem with a building, we can address it then. We can either borrow some money for that short term if it need be, or fund it some other way. If that's what the board would desire, I have no problem at all in supporting that. You have in the packet tonight 2 different ballot proposals. Pardon me. The first set is the ballot proposal that does not include the building needs. The second one does include the building needs phrase. So this board need to decide which one, if either one satisfies board member, which one we approve tonight.
Just real quick, I think I spoke last meeting. I think it's important to keep millage as clear as you can possibly keep them in order for the public to not wonder about anything. And I think with the apparatuses and equipment, there's no wondering. You're replacing the equipment, period. The fire trucks and, that could put thought in people's minds that, you could take 2 of the $4.5 or $5 million and put up a new fire station or do whatever. The thought is there. There is no thought in replacing equipment. So that's my thought on it. Mr. Frederick, you know?
Yes. At the last meeting, I asked the chief if he would provide to us a projected replacement year, the costs, the replacement age, and if you look at information A, he has provided that list of equipment and in the general order which he believes should be replaced. I have conducted a real non-scientific study, which means I had breakfast with a bunch of contractors. And I talked about this. Most of the contractors, in fact, almost every one of them simply said, we can support fire equipment. And I simply said, yeah, that's important because when they show up at your house, it better work. And they all agreed with that. But when I started talking about building, they said, well, wait a minute, you just built a new fire station over here at Lewis Avenue. Are you going to build another one? And they kind of backed away from the support of this particular millage. It is non-scientific. It is not a well-rounded group of citizens that you would test, but I thought I would report that with nine people in the morning. And my view is I would support the millage without the building improvements.
Any more discussion from board members? Do you have a question? Ms. Tinderberg?
Previously, I objected to the 10 years. I've not objected to the 0.5 mils. Tonight, I believe that the people have a right to decide. I really don't care which statement of support of the resolution we approve, actually, because it's up to this board to, before you do any building or meet any building needs, the board has to approve it anyway. So I have no comment on which one. It doesn't matter to me which one, but I do support the fact that the public has a right to make a determination. So I am in favor of one of these two. But I'd also like the minutes to reflect that I would ask that the board have a committee of the whole meeting to determine other millages that we've talked about and what the scheduling of that might be. I guess it's the same as Mr. Frederick's kind of study, but as people talk to me wherever I am, one of the concerns is, and it was brought to our attention by Mr. Janney at the last meeting, how many millages are you going to put before us, and are we going to have to decide which we think is the most important? And I think it's the leadership of this board to determine a scheduling of that, at least to meet in a committee of the whole meeting to have a discussion about that. So I would like the minutes to reflect not that whole long dialogue, but just that I'm suggesting that a committee of the whole meeting be held to determine future millages.
Okay. Any more, Mr. Francis?
You know, a scientific or non-scientific study that you did, Lamar, it does show that some are concerned with that issue, and that might be a stumbling block.
Yeah.
I guess I would rather eliminate the stumbling block because of the pressing need of the main item, which is the replacement of the equipment and apparatus that we will so desperately need. You know, three of our fire trucks are 25 years old plus, and it's hard to get parts for some of them. And I think that's the most important thing. So I guess with that in mind, if we're ready for motion, I'd like to make one.
And just on the whole, you know, we had a roof collapse at Temperance Road this last year.
Mm-hmm.
We had proposals up to $100,000. We did it with volunteers and got creative, and we did it for what, about 8,000, 7,000. So I mean, we have a lot of resources and ways to, you know, I'm not saying we can replace a building or anything like that, but you know, we always have ways to do things and make them happen and be frugal and stuff. So go ahead, back to your motion. I'm sorry.
Well, I guess I would move that we approve the second ballot proposal that's in the packet tonight, the one that does not include building needs.
Okay, we have a motion.
Second.
Motion, support by Mr. Steiner. Discussion?
Just a quick comment. You know, I agree too, that the building may be confusing if we have buildings in there. I mean, one part of me says, yes, we need things like that in there. I mean, you've got a fire truck that you can't even get into the temperate station because of the size of the doors. I think those are the kind of things that Mr. Francis said, that we can address those as a board if we had to expand in the doors of a building or something like a small add-on to a building. But I think, and it was brought up, I think, the last meeting too, somebody mentioned how the library was supposed to be not a full rebuild, but it basically turned into a brand new library. And I think that's what the citizens would probably see if we put buildings into this millage. And I think it's really appropriate that we stick with what we've got. And again, you've done a great job on the equipment and the list of the equipment that you've put a schedule together. And again, being that I've been around you guys some and plan to try to get to some more with you, I see what what you guys need. And this is a good thing that we put something together to be able to support you purchasing new equipment down the road.
Mr. Berger?
Well, one last comment, and I think it's important. If we go through this 10-year period and the citizens approve it, we will be buying equipment over a 10-year period. The next 10 years should be relatively few issues with respect to purchasing further equipment. Now, that doesn't mean that, 20 years from now, we'll be back here again. I won't be here. I'll be in the home. But the fire chief at that time will come back and say, my equipment now is 20-some years old, and we should be looking at replacing it. So it's a 10-year period, kind of a 10-year rest period. I think that's where we should go. We can tell our citizens that we'll have equipment when it gets to the site, it works. And that's the key. We owe that to the health, safety, and welfare of our citizens, and that's why I'm in strong support of this particular ballot issue. Thank you.
Any more discussion? Okay. We have a motion and support. Would you please call the roll?
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Mrs. Tinneberry?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
And Mr. Peroni.
Aye, and the motion is passed 6-0. Thank you, Chief, for being here.